those babies are already very large, like 5 or 6 inches, and the parents are still around, and suddenly, or at some point, their batteries die out, and the fish just die. At night, they put it together in a little cave. This was taken at night. But you see here, those fish, they don't need any protection anymore. They are 15 centimeters, but there was still one parent there. So those microlepis, they don't live any longer than about 3 years. So after the second year, they start spawning, and then they may live on for as long as their body lets them. But you see some video clip first of a group that is just about looking for a place to spawn. You see these are big fish. Here's the one that just grabbed a rock dwelling fish, but they have usually more spines or harder spines than the sand dwellers. But that's how they move around, usually over sand. But these are already adults that are looking. They haven't paired off yet, but they're looking for a space to make a nest. And they usually nest in quite shallow water. Even snorkelers, when they go around, you can find them only a few meters deep. And they are so much bigger than any other cichlid in the lake. But of course, there are bigger fish in the lake, like the perches. They can grow to 1.5 meters. They also get very nice yellow. It's a really beautiful fish. And this pair has some eggs here. And they defend them, as I said, until they burn out. And it's mostly the female, which is the smaller fish. So the female gets about 50-55 centimeters. The male can grow up to about 70-75 centimeters. And she's just fanning the eggs. You can see that the eggs they don't dig a crater or anything. They just deposit right there. These are big fish. If you get close to them, they are sometimes not afraid of you. They try to push you away. They nibble on your mask or so, but they usually will back off a little bit when you get close. But you see there is no fish in that area. They make sure that there is no predator coming in. And one of the most notorious egg predators are the little Tanganyikans, because they will eat the eggs of the lamprologans, because they look like baby lamprologas, and lamprologas will let their offspring of the previous spawn with the new nest, and those Tanganyikans mix in and they go in and eat the eggs. But I've not seen that with the lamprologas. They keep all the other fish away. Well, here's a pair that's a female, and all the wrigglers are put here, and she just makes sure there's no fish around. So at this stage, they can still protect all of them. If you get closer, you can see that some of those larvae, they start moving around, so that the next day they will all swim free, and that is the most vulnerable time for. You can see they're hopping around, and they are moving out, and you see later on that the female is picking them up and spitting them back in there. That's the male. $10. So even though they see those tiny little wrigglers, we'll spit them back. But of course, a few hours later, that's impossible, because then hundreds of them will be moving. way. Pick up some more. So for about a week, that area is kept free from fish. When they swim free and they move away, and all the algae eaters, they move in because the algae has been growing there for a week without being harvested. And then when they swim free, this was still a very big cloud, probably several thousand of babies still, but they're already an inch and a half, already yellow in color. And they are swimming away from him. I was just trying to follow them. They also change when they have free swimming fry. They get barred pattern on the body, not yellow anymore, but more black and white bars. So most of the other substrate brooders, a lot of people call them egg layers, but as far as we know, all the cichlids lay eggs. So the cave brooders are the smaller cichlids that are substrate brooders, and most of the lephalogins, they fall in that category. And I have two samples, Trachocephalus, Neolamphalogus trachocephalus, and Compressiceps. So the Trachocephalus is a kind of standard way of the lephalogins for breeding. You have a male and a female, they choose a cave in the rocks. The eggs are deposited usually on the ceiling, on the side of the rocks. And at the moment the fry hatch, and when they swim free, they come out and they feed on the plankton. So almost all the baby lephalogins feed on plankton. And both male and female are defending their offspring just in front of the cave. When there's any danger, they go back inside the cave. And after about a month or so, they may spawn again. And for most species, if the leftover from the previous spawn is still allowed to be in the nest, even when their eggs or new babies are there. But for others, the bigger ones are chased away because they may eat the new babies. The Trachocephalus is found in the central part of the lake. This was videoed near Ecola on the central Tanzanian shore. So this pair is defending. You see some fry around. So they just station themselves and make sure there is no predators coming in to snatch a few of their offspring. They have between 500 and 1,000 babies per spawn. So you see there's only 1,000 left there. So a lot of them have been eaten. But that's how it goes. Each pair just need to produce one other set, another pair in their offspring to just maintain the species. You see the babies, they feed just in plankton that floats by. Later on, when they get older, they will start eating snails because turtles feed on snails, which they find just on the upper part of the sandy patches between the rocks. I think these babies are maybe 10 days old or something. And the other species, there is a small group of species where the females are much smaller than the males. And most of the time it means that one male can have 2 or 3 or more females. The females of those species, they look for a small cave to deposit eggs that is too small for the male to enter. So these are little cracks in rocks where only the female can go in. And she will sit on the eggs and make sure that no other fish can come in and eat the eggs and larvae, including the male. The male may also eat the eggs. So usually the compressiceps is kind of aggressive towards other members of the same species and will chase them away. So if you see a bigger one and a small one together, it means it's a pair or looking for a place to spawn. They are predators. Usually they feed on shrimp that they find between rocks or baby fish. They're very much compressed laterally and they can penetrate very narrow cracks between the rocks to get to their prey. When they are small, they may also hide in empty shells and shell beds and feed on babies or adults of the shell dwellers. But these shell-dwelling compressiceps, when you take it out of the lake, put them in a tank, they grow up to be as big as a regular compressiceps. So only the environment keeps them small. But if you take away the threat of being eaten, they will grow larger. And that's very difficult to find. That's a female that sits in a crack in the rocks. And at the bottom of that crack there is a number of eggs. And she will just sit there. They don't have a lot of eggs, maybe up to 150, 200. They're quite big. It takes a while, 8 to 10 days before you see babies swimming out. She will not really guard their offspring. She just guards the little crack where she has spawned in. And the babies should just move out. So that female is only occupied for about 2 weeks with brood care. And then the babies have disappeared. That female just backed out of that hole. You can see that the eggs are down here. Also, when you want to breed this fish in your aquarium, you just put a little shell in there that only the female can fit in. Not a big shell, because then the male can also go in, but a small shell. The female will go in there. If she stays in there when you feed them, then you know she has eggs. You just take the shell and the female out, put them in a little aquarium, and 2 weeks later you can shake out all the babies from the shell and you can put the female back in the community tank. Works very nicely. Those females, they are so much stuck in those holes, if you try to take her out, there's no way you can take her out. You can try and pull her, but she's really stuck in there. So predators cannot really get at it. That irregular shape that you see here, that is just salt encrusted on the rocks or on everything. There's so much, the pH is so high in the lake that there's a continuous fallout of salt, and they crust everything that is in the lake, shells and rocks, and even sometimes on the sand. And that over time makes very irregular pattern with enough holes in there for small cichlids to hide in, including females of compressiceps. And then those babies, they are not really guarded. The female only guards that little spawning site. They move around. Of course, they are very vulnerable, so they just hop around like really shell dwellers. It's very rare to see a baby compression sex. And in that way, they also sometimes end up in the shell beds where you see them sometimes hunting shell dwellers. Well, those shell dwellers are the same as the cave brooders, but they are small enough to fit inside an empty shell, which is just their cave. And those shells, very interestingly, if a snail dies in the waters in the UK, that shell dissolves in about a month's time. There is nothing left over from the shell. It just dissolves because of the lower pH, and there's not many minerals in the water in UK streams. But in Lake Tanganyika, the pH is very high at 9.2. There's a lot of minerals in the water, so instead of dissolving the shell, the water is actually making the shell thicker. It gets a thicker crust on it. So when the snail dies, the shell rolls into a depression, and all the shells of all the snails that have died rolls into depression. You have shell beds which can be miles and miles long and 100 meters deep. And they have been dating some of those shells in those shell beds. And I think it was about 5 feet deep. They found shells that were 1,600 years old that was just lying there. So if you're small enough, you can fit in the shell. It's a very good environment because you're protected from predators. Well, before those shells roll down to depressions in deeper water, you have shells everywhere. So in the sandy habitat, where there is, particularly close to where rivers flow out into the lake, you have some more mud, there's more snails, there's more shells. And ocellatus is found throughout the lake, and mostly between 5 and 10 meters, so quite shallow. The males of the ocellatus grows to about 5 centimeters maximum. And he has a territory, and in the territory must be a few shells. He needs one for himself, and he needs a few others for females. He has a little harem of 2 or 3 females. So when a male sets up a territory, he looks for a place, maybe a square yard, where there is a few shells. He will take one shell for himself, but he also is hiding that shell by throwing sand over it, also positioning that shell. And he takes up one for himself, and the other shells he completely covers with sand, so other fish won't see him. When a female comes to his territory, wants to live with that male, then the male will uncover one shell and tell the female, you can live there. If there's another female, then she can also take residence in this territory. But that female has to spawn in the next 2 or 3 days, otherwise he will chase her away. So the female spawns, then the female takes care mostly of the offspring, but the offspring can move around to other shells, mix with the brood of another female, or go into the male's shell, until they're about a centimeter, centimeter and a half. They grow, they try to stay as long as possible in the shell, because that is their protection. And then they have to live a very dangerous life on the sand by just hopping around until they are big enough to hold their own shell. There are a few babies here, difficult to see. They are very aggressive in defending their offspring. They are not afraid of anything big. If you've ever kept this fish in your tank, once I was cleaning the tank, taking the dirt off, and then the female was attacking my hose. I took the hose out and the female was still hanging on it. Or biting in your hands. Like this female, she had some eggs probably here. And when I pointed my finger, she was attacking me viciously in my hand. She's not afraid of anything big. And those babies, they stay in for as long as possible. She only has about 15 eggs, 12 to 20 eggs. And in the end, there's only one left that still fits inside, and then the female, either she spawns again, or she moves to another male and spawns with another male in another territory. And then those baby ocellatas, they have to find some protection, maybe in smaller shells that adults don't want to have, or at least try to survive. Well, the brevis is something different because in ocellatas, both male and female need their own shell, but the brevis is even smaller, and they don't need two shells. The whole family sits in one shell. So the male is a little bit bigger, that's the female. When they are disturbed, the female goes in first, and then the male. And both of them will fit in there, they spawn in there, they have babies, but once the female is taking care of babies, then the male is looking for another female. When you see females with babies, then usually there is no male around. But they always sit in front of the shell. They don't venture very far. They feed on plankton. They only have to rise up a little bit to feed on plankton. So you can find them in areas where there's only very few shells around, because they only need one. There's another pair. In some areas you have many of them. They're usually found a little bit deeper than ocellatas. You sometimes find them together, but ocellatas is rarely deeper than 10 meters, but the brevis you can find up to 30, 40 meters deep. So they're very protective, so I guess they have eggs or wrigglers in the shell. That's a female by herself with probably a week and a half old babies in there. And also those babies, when they are expelled from the shell, they have to live for a while on the sand or try to find small shells where they can hide in. Because the sand, of course, is very dangerous territory for a small fish. So now we go to a little bit larger cichlids that make their own nest. And in this case I took lemeri, that's a predator. They get quite big, 20-25 centimeters for the males, with the females not bigger than 10-12 centimeters. And they breed in the same way as a compressiceps. The female is much smaller. She looks for, or she makes a little hole in the sand or under a rock that is just big enough for herself. And then both male and female will guard for a couple of days, and then the male looks for another female. And then it's only up to the female to guard them. It is an ambush predator. They have this model pattern. They just sit on the ground and wait for small fish to pass by. They don't see them, and then they will eat it. So this is a pair. The big one is the male. That's the female. That is the hole that they have prepared. There is others either coming by to take over that hole, because that is probably a good place to spawn, or there can be another female trying to lure the male away to her little department. another female trying to get that male. But I guess he's not impressed. There's another pair. So the female is spawning in here, and you will see later on how the male fertilizes the eggs, because the female goes in. Well, she first tells the male that she's going to lay some eggs inside. She goes inside. The male cannot go in there. So what he does is he just positions himself over that entrance to the little hole and releases his milk. And by the movement of the female inside, that milk gets to the eggs and fertilizes the eggs. It takes a while that they get used to being right there. That's the sign she's going to lay eggs. The milk goes up there, and now he's releasing milk. So the eggs get fertilized inside. And also, in particular, when the female moves out, then water streams back in, and that's how the milk gets into contact with the eggs. And this goes on for several hours. And they have a few hundred eggs. Kansas. There we go.
Ed, would that be a hole they've dug themselves, or is that a natural hole?
I think that hole was made by the Tanganyikans. That's what they usually do. So you have a crater usually next to a rock, and then when the eggs, when the larvae hatch, they dig a little hole in the side of the crater where it's like a nursery room. And in that area there's many Tanganyikans. You see them swimming by all the time. But there are good holes for other fish to spawn. If you're big enough to chase away the Tanganyikans. And that is how all the other lamprologans, where the female was much smaller and she's in a little hole that's too small for the male, they spawn in the same way. The male just positions themselves over that opening, releases milk, and just by the movement in and out of the female, that milk gets into contact with the eggs. Yeah, those babies of Lemeri, they look like little bumblebees. They have those big black bars. And at that time, there's only the female. The male is not there. Probably the male is looking for her or has already found another female. And usually only the female takes care of them. And also they, when they're small, you'll find them in shell beds where they find shelter, but also they feed already on the baby shell dwellers of other species there. It's a predator. So you find a lot of food there. So from the substrate brooders, we go to the biparental mouth brooders, which is seen as an intermediate between the substrate brooding and the mouth brooding. And a kind of primitive biparental mouth brooder is periodically related. It's a scale eater that you find throughout the lake. And in that case, they still spawn more or less like a substrate brooder. The female lays a neat row of eggs. Then the male fertilizes them, then the female comes back, pick them up, or lay more eggs. Sometimes it takes half an hour before the female picks up the whole clutch of eggs. So you have here the female laying a little neat row of eggs, very small eggs, and the male fertilizes them, and then the female will pick them up, or not, or lay another row of eggs next to it. Those eggs hatch already in 6 days, then they're already free-swimming, fry in her mouth. Then she releases the babies. Then the male will brood them until they don't fit in his mouth anymore. Then the female helps him again. So even though they are mouth brooders, they stay as a pair together till the babies are really big, maybe 2-3 centimeters, until they think they have to start another brood. So it is the female that broods the eggs and the larvae when they're free swimming. Then the male will take them for at least another 2 weeks. And then they get bigger and bigger, and also the female will take them up in her mouth. It's a very common cichlid. It feeds on scales of other fish, so there's a lot of food around, and scales will regrow on other fish. So they're kind of harvesting scales. They just want to go back. If the parents are not quick enough to retrieve all their offspring, there's some danger, then all those babies, they sit suddenly on the substrate. They don't move. It's very difficult to see. You take a photo and later on, then you see where the babies were, but underwater you cannot see them anymore because they don't move. Well, this is a pair, they were defending offspring that was already too big to fit inside their mouth, but they are still defending them. And if there's some danger, they make a small sign with their body, and then all the fish drop down to the substrate. But you see several hundred offspring because the eggs are so small. The fish is not very large, maybe 10 centimeters, 12 centimeters. The male is slightly bigger than the female. You see they're now sitting on the rock, you hardly see them. And when the coast is clear, then they swim up. But they don't take it back in their mouth again. It's too many and too big already. Another biparental mouth brooder. There are several species again, are the goby cichlids. They live in very shallow water, they hop around in the shallows, and they stay together as a male and female, as a pair. They are mouth brooders, where the female will brood the eggs and larvae for about 10 days, and then she will give the larvae to the male, who will keep them for another 10 days until they're fully grown inside the male's mouth, and then the male will release them and not take them back, or maybe one day take them back. These are the ones that we have in our tank: the Erythmodes, Tanganyikans, Spatodes. They breed in the same way. Tanganyikans is the smallest of the group. You hardly ever see one adult, there's always two. They're all vegetarians. They feed on the algae in very shallow water, usually not deeper than 2 meters. So they're very shallow, always as a pair together. And very often you see one or the other having distended mouth, where they are carrying larvae or fry. When it is the male, then he has probably fry in there, and the female can be also eggs. The female is a little bit smaller, but males do not have harems. They stay with the female all the time. Also, when they're not breeding, they stay as a pair together. They have very long teeth, and they don't feed on insects. They feed on algae, where other fish can't reach them. In little pockets of the substrate, they can just fork it out with their teeth. And as I said, you're always together. Looks like she has some spawn. And this may be a moment where the female passes on the fry to, or the larvae to the male. This is an aquarium photo. The female, you see there's a little fish on top of this still big egg yolk. She spits them out, and the male will grab them. She does one, and then the male will take over brooding the offspring. And maternal mouth brooders, that is also a large group in Lake Tanganyika. And you look at my favorite fish, Melanogenes and Bowie. Melanogenes is a sand-dwelling fish that feeds on stuff they filter from the sand. They have no color. They just blend in with the environment. But when they want to breed, and we don't know what the trigger is, but I think it's just a 1-year-old. When they're 1-year-old, they come to shallow water, and males start making territories which are about 50, 60 centimeters in diameter. Then there's a spawning dish in the center of it, and in between they make kind of decorations, either ridges or little heaps of sand. And for each population, it looks a bit different. All those territories are next to each other, so you can have 50 to 100 males all next to each other with territories. And they stay on the territory. You see, everyone has a male, because if the male leaves, then another male will take over. There's a lot of surplus males around. And usually the breeding is in the afternoon. In the morning they are still feeding. This is another locality where the males build little heaps of sand around the spawning area, which is just in the middle. And males, when they are contesting the boundaries of the territory, they always show up the fins, and they're really, really beautiful fish. And the funny thing is, when they want to impress a female, they plant all the fins, they fall on the side, and only distend their mouth. So here they're really good-looking fish, but if they want to impress a female, they fall on the side. They even plant their tail fin, and only the mouth is distended, and that's how they attract females to come to spawn. It's really funny to see, because you have females swimming over that breeding colony, and all the males suddenly, they fall on the side trying to get that female to spawn with them. So the female goes down, they make a few rounds, and then she drops a few eggs. Before she can turn around again to pick them up, the male has already fertilized these eggs, because that female, after having spawned with just one male, she can go to the next male. So for all the efforts that this male put in, he wants to make sure that it carries his genes. So the female drops these eggs, she turns around to pick them up. In the meantime, that male has already fertilized these eggs. And she can actually go to another male. It's usually 3 or 4 males they spawn with. And all these females, they are more or less in the same stage. So when that whole school comes from some deeper water, they set up camp, they make a big breeding arena. Then all the females, in a matter of a week, they spawn with all the males. And so they are more or less at the same time when they can release their offspring, because if one female would release one mouthful of babies, then it takes a few milliseconds, and then the babies are eaten by predators. But if all these females release a mouthful of babies, then you have 10,000 babies around, and the survival chances of those fish are much higher. So that is how those sand dwellers usually spawn. They release their offspring en masse. So you see, these are all the territories that are the spawning site, and this is kind of decoration around it. Maybe it's a kind of signal for females that this is the right species. And those males are busy all day long to make this territory, but also to make sure that there is no little grain, bigger grain of sand that the female can mistake for an egg, because if the female is laying eggs and she picks up a pebble instead of an egg, then of course she will destroy the other eggs in her mouth. So all those spawning sites are meticulously clean, very fine-grained sand that the male, he just takes a mouthful of sand and then filters it, and whatever comes through the gills, that is that fine sand on the spawning side. And those little hills or ridges he builds around it are very symmetrical, but you would think, how can the fish do that? I don't know. It looks always very neatly spaced around the spawning side. And instead of diving into the sand, they just suck up the top layer of the sand, as you can see here. So he can stay almost parallel to the surface of the sand. And when you choose that sand and release that very fine stuff over the spawning dish, then all the coarser material he spits out on the wall around this territory. That looks always more coarse material. And always showing off the neighboring male. And the females are just around these breeding arenas, sitting on the sand, either already brooding eggs or waiting for a chance to spawn with these males. So when they swim over the breeding arena, you see all those males flopping on the side, trying to get them. You see there is a male, that's a female swimming over. That male. That one. So you see where I can't even see the female, but because of the reflection of the male side, you can see what direction she's swimming. So there are all the females here. They look like they're having eggs already in their mouth. Well, in the aquarium they have up to 60 eggs, but I think in the lake it's maybe more like 30 or 40 eggs. And they may spawn a few times, but I think their breeding period is only once a year. They may spawn a few times, and then the next year is the next generation. They grow in 1 year, they're adults, and they can spawn in 1 year. So also in your aquarium, when you breed this fish, always save a few offspring of the first spawn, because they will be your breeders for next year. So a year later, your male is not fertile anymore, at least in my cases that I had. That they will still be spawning, but the eggs will not be fertilized. So they can just breed for a year. One of the most spectacular fish, also for snorkelers, sometimes very shallow, they build their bowers. See how the aquarium's following. Large fish, 20 centimeters. Very nice colors. The males, they build a spawning site, usually on top of a rock, usually on a flat rock, not too far from the bottom, and try to get females to spawn in there. In many areas, still a very common fish in the south of the lake. A lot of them have already been fished out by overfishing, by gill nets. They put gill nets over the rocks. And usually that's what you find in the gill nets. So that spawning dish, the bower is about 50, 60 centimeters, or maybe up to a meter. And the male is just busy with it. But if there's a female, then he will try to have her lay eggs in it. And those are the females, just waiting for the male to get ready with his business. The setter they feed on sediment that lays on rocks or on sand. In fact, they eat a lot of food. Most of it is not digestible, as sand or other stuff. So there's a very little, small component of what they ingest that actually gives them energy. There's a female, and she waits for the male to come back to lay some eggs. The male is actually never very close to the eggs. This female is a bit annoyed that the male is always gone and she just wants to lay eggs. Every time she's ready to go, then the male is gone again. Let's just stop it. There's another female, she's actually laying eggs. And she lays eggs, they sit on the sand, and then the male, he moves over, but not really in contact with them. You'll see a little bit later. That is the whole distance he has. So she lays some eggs, you see two eggs. Later on you will see that he is releasing milk, and by his movement of the spectral fins there is a kind of flow of water going down along his ventral fins that will reach the eggs and fertilize the eggs. Now you will see it here. In slow motion, the female drops an egg. The male still far away from the egg, but he lowers his ventral fins. And you see the egg is moving, so that means that there is a little bit of flow of water that makes the semen come into contact with the egg. You see it again here. You see that egg moves a little bit because of that flow that the male produces. You see? So that's how the semen comes in contact with the egg, so he doesn't really have to sit on the egg to fertilize it. And usually that female will also go to another male. It's usually 2 or 3 males that fertilize the brood of, on average, of the female. One more maternal mouth brood is where the eggs are actually fertilized inside the mouth of the female, and males have egg dummies that they use to make sure that the female picks up the milk that the male leaves in the nest. That's the female. So the male leads, it goes in front of the female, and he is also shaking his body very much, and he's releasing also his milk and his smell. So the female following that male can also smell, oh, this is the right species because he smells right. And he goes down into the spawning dish, and he will release some milk, and not leaving actually the spawning place, but raises his tail. So here he just released some milk, then he holds those yellow flaps right there where he released the milk. The female comes in, and she will snap at those yellow flaps because she thinks these are still eggs, but at the same time she inhales already the semen. Then she will lay a few eggs. She will pick up the eggs. The male is not there, but then the male will leap her back again and does the same, and then those eggs are fertilized inside her mouth. And then those females that are mouth brooding, they usually group together in small nursery schools and release the offspring at the same time. A similar way is done here, but this fish has no visible spawning site. It just has a territory in the open water, a 3-dimensional spawning site. The males have a breeding leg, but there is no structure. They are just having a certain distance to each other, and then females are guided to that invisible territory by the male holding the yellow tips of the ventral fins on one side of the body. He's quivering, and then the female will snap at these yellow flaps. And I think she is then already ingesting the milk. Then the male turns around and positions themselves like here over the female with the mouth extended, very typically for cypric rodents. And then the female will drop an egg. She swims backward to pick it up, but the male stays all the way there. This is Photoshop, of course. And then she may go to other males, and then those females, they will stay in a nursery school and then release the offspring all at the same time. You see, there are a few of those hippodromes around in the lake, hundreds, thousands of them. These look to be sub-adults, and then you have 3 species that can mix in that school, and then the males, they set up territories in the open water, but closer to rocks. There's also predators coming through, like Peter Lamplug's alligators and perpendicula. They feed on these fish. So this movement from predators, they chase them away. And there it comes shooting through. In some places there's lots of these fish. Usually when there's a very steep shore with large rocks, there seems to be also a lot of plankton. They feed on zooplankton, but sometimes also algae and what have you floating in the water. But these are all males. This is a breeding lek where males just have a territory in the free water. And females can swim up to the male, then he will show the female where she can lay eggs by holding those yellow fins or yellow-tipped ventral fins on one side. Releasing male, the female will snap at those fins, and at that point she will also lay eggs. Interesting for these species is that you have males in 3 different color morphs. They're still the same species, but the males with the black fins, they usually are aggressive to other males with black fins, and they regard the males with the yellow fins not as their own species, which is good, because now you can pack twice as many males in the same area, because the black males are only aggressive to the other males, and they make their distance of their territories to similar males, so you can have twice as many. If you have 3 different color forms, and you can have 3 times as many males in the same area. The females, they go to different males, but there is like 60–70% more chance that a female goes as a preference for one of these males. And they found also in some populations of leptosoma, this is leptosoma jumbo, but leptosoma where the males can either have a yellow or a blue tail, that female, there is some DNA difference between the blue tails and the yellow tails, so they're kind of almost trying to make 2 different species out of those color morphs. There is no real segregation yet, it's still 60–70%. But you can imagine over time, even just having the 2 forms side by side, they can evolve into different species just because of the different tail color of the males. That holds the fin one end, one side. who's very busy when there is a willing female in this territory. You see, there the female snaps at the fins, but the female is not laying any eggs. Because I'm sitting here with the camera going. But you see all the other females around, they have already dark, so that fry already in the mouth. But I guess if I wouldn't be here with the camera and meter away, the female would have laid some eggs. He doesn't give up easily. And that was the last example. Thank you very much.